Okay. Big Brother is now watching. We're being monitored, so be on your best behavior. Hello, William. Good to see you, man. Okay. We're going to be starting on page 111, scanning for malware. This is Richard Rohr, just this. And happy to have you with us if you're watching a recording. And you're always welcome to join us live and online. And all the links and information you need is in the comments section. So take a look there. It would be great to have you with us. Before we dive into the text for tonight, is there any unfinished business? Is there anything that you have undeveloped from last week or things that you've been thinking about that you'd like to drop in right now? Okay. By the way, we've been getting tons of downloads from Tony in Portugal and now in Spain. He's walking the Camino, so he's sending us all kinds of stuff. So they are having an adventure, definitely. And they walked, how was it, 13, 14 miles today. And three-quarters of the way through, Tony said he was ready to call an Uber. But Rosemary kept him going, and they made it, along with a little bit of a break and some lunch. So at any rate, it was great to see what he's up to, but we do miss him here. All right, let's dive in. Scanning for malware. This is the fifth of 12 of these final little prompts and practices that Richard is throwing at us here at the end of the book. And each one of these are real nuts and bolts, just very specific things that we can do during our day to inch us closer to this practice of presence. So let's take a look. I remember when one of my tech friends first said I had malicious software on my computer. He seemed quite worried about it. And malware sure sounded terrible to me, like porn or something. Now I think of scanning for malicious software as a good metaphor for what the first few minutes in any session of contemplative prayer must always be. If you do not do a conscious scan of how and why your mind and heart are operating in a certain way at the beginning of your prayer time, often hidden and well disguised malware will control the entire experience. You often need a whole new operating system or a whole new head. Scanning for spiritual malware is a practice worth doing several times a day. Take a moment to sit quietly and watch the screen of your mind and heart so that you can recognize what is occupying and driving them, just as software runs your computer. In time, you will get good at sensing, recognizing when you are flowing outward with a positive and generous energy and when you are sucking inward with a stingy, complaining energy, the malware. One is love, the other is death. Stay at prayer for as long as it takes for you to move from negative energy to positive energy, from death to love. Otherwise, you have not prayed at all. Flow and resistance to flow will both become obvious as you recognize your own unique patterns of both life energy and death energy. Remember, you can be doing very good things, but if you are doing them with negative energy, the results will not be life-giving for yourself, for any around you, or for the world. Thoughts and energy have consequences. The opposite is also true. You can do faulty things, but if you're doing them with positive life energy, they will still bear fruit for the world. As Yahweh said of imperfect David, I see the heart instead of appearances. So run your malware scan over your heart and mind whenever possible, not to judge, hate, or condemn, but just to see the problem and install some new firewalls and soul protection devices. Okay, there's our malware metaphor. Hopefully, Danielle thinks it's kinder and gentler now than it first sounded. Um, any thoughts? Anything jump out at you? Any initial comments before we dive in? Okay. Well, let's start back at the top. And he's introducing this metaphor. So he had malicious software on the computer, And now he thinks of it as this metaphor of scanning for malicious software as for what the first few minutes of any session of contemplative prayer must always be. So if you think about, sometimes what we do when we start contemplative prayer session is we'll do the body scan. We've talked about that laser light that starts at the crown and then of your head and then slowly runs down your body. And what you're doing is relaxing anywhere your mind's eye has the light hit. And so that scan is for kind of a somatic relaxation. Now he's talking about an interior scan. You know, what is going on in your head? What kind of thoughts are spinning around in there? And then you look at the heart. What kind of emotions are being triggered there? Are there any emotions being triggered there? And so he's using this malware scan to take a look at what is going on inside to try to become aware of what the mix is, the interior mix is, before you actually go into the prayer session itself. Because if that stuff is running at the moment, then it's going to color the whole process. And so to become aware of it, to go through the process of letting it go, Daniel brought up the welcoming practice, which is coming up later. That would be a great tool to use maybe at that point, right at the beginning of your sit, and see if you can cleanse at that point. We're going to be talking about mantrams. I have an article to go through because I think that's another good tool for you to use if you are finding yourself in a state. But here's that metaphor. You got the malware on the computer. You got to put Norton on it or whatever you've got and scan for it. Get the malicious files off the hard drive so that you can complete your work in a productive fashion. Same thing is going on interiorly. He says if you do not do a conscious scan of how and why your mind and heart are operating in a certain way at the beginning of your prayer time, often hidden and well disguised malware will control the entire experience. You often need a whole new operating system or a whole new head. So you got to clear those programs. And what are those programs? Well, we're right back to core beliefs, aren't we? We're right back to those programs that get installed for happiness and survival. I love the way that Thomas Keating talks about them, right? Remember, he talks about programs that get installed early in childhood when we first realize that the world does not rotate around us, does not revolve around us, that there isn't always going to be someone there to meet every single need at the moment that we want that need met. And then into actual abuse and chaos and neglect and all the things that happen in homes of origin and in other situations in early childhood. And those programs are installed for that child to be able to survive through those environments. And so whether it's the three major areas, security and survival, right? Power and control, and affection and esteem. So those are the three areas and the 6 points that Keating identified as these core beliefs, these programs that are running. They get installed at the time that we need them. And they're absolutely essential because that's the way that we survive through. But when we change our circumstances and move into young adulthood or move out of the home or whatever the situation may be, it's not like those programs just unwrite themselves. They don't just go away. They're still there. They're still running in the background. They're running in the unconscious where we can't access them. And we don't even realize that they are still running because now we believe that they are our reality. We identify with them. They are who we are. And so, whether it's looking at the way that we deal with life through an Enneagram wheel, or whether it's Myers Briggs, or whether it's DISC, or any of the other ways that we can look at ourselves, look at our personality traits, look at the way our go to ways of dealing with obstacles in our lives, these have been forged, starting in our childhood, but they're not who we really are. They're programs that were put in place for specific purposes that have now outlived their usefulness, and now they're just mucking everything up. They're just part of the filter that changes the color of life around us. And so, if we are going to really engage in contemplative practice, um, part of what we're trying to do, especially as you're going into a contemplative sit, is to clear all that stuff away, at least become aware that it's in operation, and then find ways to be able to move back to center as you're moving into your contemplative sit. Um, in the process of contemplation, a lot of the stuff is going to bubble up anyway. And you're going to be able to become consciously aware of those unconscious programs. And once you're aware of them, now you can apply CBT-like, you know, practices to get them gone and change the way that you think and change the way that you operate, change the obsessive thinking and the compulsive behavior. But they have to come up into consciousness first. So this is another way of trying to become aware of what's actually going on. Why is it there? And this dovetails perfectly with how Henry Nouwen described Jesus' temptations in the wilderness. Remember, there was three of them. The devil tells Jesus to turn these stones into bread, to bow down to him so that all the kingdoms of the world would be under his control, and then to throw himself down from the parapet of the temple, and that he would be borne up at the last minute by angels' wings. And so if you think about it, what Nouwen calls our need for relevance, what's more relevance than making bread out of stone, right? Power and control, and then, of course, he calls it the need to be relevant, powerful, and spectacular. Because if Jesus had jumped from that point to the temple, he would have landed in the courtyard where all the people were, and they would be amazed to see him at the last minute raised up. And so the same thing with Keating. He's got those same three areas. The three temptations of Jesus are symbolic of the total mix of what we need to survive: survival and security, power and control, affection and esteem. That's everything kind of symbolic of what we need as human beings and we're yearning for and trying to find programs to supply if our environment and our family is not going to supply them for us. So this is what's going on. This is the operating system that we have written for ourselves unconsciously. And now we're trying to overwrite. We're trying to get past. So we need to scan for this. We need to be aware that something else is going on that's not reality. And that's not immediately apparent to us. We're going to assume that these programs are real. This is who we are, but it's not. Now he's going to take it a step further. Not just something that we want to do before we're trying to sit down and have a contemplative session, but scanning for spiritual malware is a practice worth doing several times a day. Take a moment to sit quietly and watch the screen of your mind and heart so that you can recognize what is occupying and driving them, just as software runs your computer. And so now we're going to do it all throughout the day, at various times during the day. Why did the ancients have set times of prayer that were spaced at intervals throughout the day? It was a reset. We know that going through our day, we can get way off base and get so wrapped up in everything that we're doing and all the tasks that we have to run, and then all the triggers and all the wild thoughts and the wandering mind, and we can never touch down all day long. But if there are times that break into our day and stop us for a moment, okay, what am I doing? What am I thinking about? Is it the same thing? Has my mind wandered off? Am I being triggered right now? Can I calm back down? Can I come back to ground and then start again for another 3 hour period and then break and reset again? And so this is what he's advocating for us to put in practice for ourselves is resets during the day where we actually scan and find out where we are and then bring ourselves back. And he says, in time, you'll get good at sensing, recognizing when you are flowing outward with a positive and generous energy and when you are sucking inward with a stingy, complaining energy, which he calls the malware. One is love and the other is death. So can we start to actually take what we do offline in contemplative prayer and then bring it online throughout the day in the form of mindfulness and in the form of these quick resets?
Dave, this reminds me of the conversation we had a couple of weeks back. I think Daniel made the comment about either getting stuck in unresolved grief or being able to return to unconditional love or profound love, I guess, or profound compassion. Um, and I like what you said about, like in the present moment, like when there's an upset, that's one thing when something triggers you and you react to the clear and present danger or the frustration in the moment. But if I find myself thinking about it 5 days later and it's still churning, like that's definitely unresolved grief.
Hmm.
That's the malware kind of thing. And I used that with a couple of clients, and it went over really well. Like this idea of if I'm still churning on it a week later, then it's about me, right? It's not just about the other person. So Danielle, thanks for that little nugget.
And that's exactly it. And the other thing is that we don't want to just use this scanning and use this introspection when we think we need it. We want to use it when we think we don't need it, right? We want to put it in place throughout the day. In other words, create a structure for yourself and then put it into place. Actually, look, because once again, if you're not practicing this, it's not going to be there for you when you do need it. When we get triggered, we think those emotions are real. We think they're justified. We're inside our space helmet, and in there, everything is justified. Everything makes total sense. Our anger makes sense. Our resentment and whatever it is that we're feeling makes total sense. And our imagined response is going to make total sense as well. But if we are practicing stepping outside of that bubble at intervals, then we're going to be, it'll be there for us and we'll be able to use that tool when the train is leaving the station and we're just along for a ride. Then we can still make that break, open up the space between the stimulus and the response, like Viktor Frankl says, right? Then we have that space to make a different choice, a different decision, and to actually grow. But we're going to need to practice this throughout the day if it's going to be there for us when we actually need it. It's just like the evacuation plan on a hotel hallway wall. You can't be thinking you're going to be able to look at that and read it and study it when the hall is full of smoke and the fire is bearing down on you. You need to do that beforehand. It's going to be the same thing here. So we want to just get in the practice of doing this, getting good at the technique of it so that it's kind of muscle memory. It's kind of automatic for us when we're getting really triggered and in the heat of battle. He says, stay at prayer. He's back in offline now. Stay at prayer for as long as it takes for you to move from negative energy to positive energy, from death to love. Otherwise, you have not prayed at all. So when we are sitting down for a contemplative sit and we realize that we are triggered, we realize that something's going on, he's saying, until we get centered, don't leave the sit. Well, that may not be possible, depending on how long that takes you, but you get his point. It's like don't think that you can just go on and do your 20-minute centering prayer sit and you've done it something. You know, even if you don't get to the sit at all, just work on the welcoming practice. Just work on the ability to get grounded again. That's enough of it. That's the essence of it right there. Maybe all that you can do at a given point.
A lot of this reminds me too of just like the 10th step in AA, taking that daily inventory and on awakening, page 86 through page 88 in the big book. Just, throughout the day, when uncertain as to what, the next step is going to be, just pause and pray and ask for help. And certainly something that we can't do on our own, but I love the idea of just kind of this constant theme of scanning and observing oneself too, kind of from the outside.
Right.
Um, but yeah, the constant maintenance of our spiritual condition through every infinitesimal moment of our lives.
Mhm.
Mhm. That's it. In the next paragraph, he says, flow and resistance to flow will both become obvious as you recognize your own unique patterns of both life energy and death energy. Now, those are some nice words, but what the heck do they mean? And can you give me an example of what you think that feels like? Flow and resistance to flow. He says they become obvious. Are they obvious to you? Are they obvious to you in your own body, in your own mind and spirit as a daily occurrence? Do you know when you're in flow, quote unquote, or when you're resisting flow? Do you have a sense of what that feels like?
Mm.
Or an example of where you've been in both or recovering from resistance to flow?
I'm going to quote Jerry at one point in time because that made me laugh. And she came in kind of distraught one day and said, "I have a case of the I don't wannas." And that really struck me, and that for me is my resistance to flow. Um, and I don't know, I feel it in my chest, I think is where I feel it. Um, Either my breathing is really shallow and there's something going on there and that I'm really fighting. I'm in a fight stance on. And that to me is what it looks like for me when I'm resisting flow.
That's good, Judy. That's really good. You
What
reminded me of what I sometimes say to Mary. I don't want to get up. I'm a Toys R Us kid.
That's cute.
when I'm working with clients, there are times when throughout the day you might find yourself feeling completely drained by
Mm,
an interaction where there's just like, I don't know if I would call it death energy, but it's the heaviness that's there.
yeah.
And when I notice it with me, soon as I notice it, if I just take a nice deep breath and really lean in and listen to the client, like just
Mm,
make that conscious effort to just engage with the client,
mm,
that energizes me and
mm,
gets me back in.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm almost always, if I am bored or tired or something like that, it has to do with presence
yeah.
and not being fully present, basically. Um,
Mm.
and when I'm in flow, my sessions go by in 15, 20 minutes, and both my clients and I are upset that the hour is up, versus, ugh, dragging it out.
This is so good. Think about what we just heard. We just heard that this flow or resistance to flow can feel like the tightness in the chest, the fight or flight kind of stance, the pugilistic kind of stance. It can feel like a complete drain of energy, and you're just like all poured out. And so it's somatic, and you're going to feel it in your body. But it can take on a lot of different forms, and so it's important to kind of look at that and realize, how does it feel for you? What does that feel like? Because it's not just something that you can just categorize real quickly. But you will know it as that resistance. Think of it like, has someone ever just really offended you? Let me count the ways,
Oh
right?
no, never.
Yeah. So you get really offended. What happens? Everything tightens up, your face gets flushed, all those the somatic things happen as the body starts pumping out the cortisol and the this and the that and the other thing. You're feeling all that. And then have you ever had the experience where you're in that state, and then the other person or somebody else just either looks at you, smiles at you, or just comes around and puts an arm around you, or you realize that it was a mistaken, impression on your part, and it all just flows right back out of you, just almost as quickly as it came, and everything comes to rest, and you can smile again, and you laugh about it. And I don't know if you've ever had that experience, but it's so interesting because it spikes up and it can flow all the way right back out again, once you have become relieved of the reason that you were offended in the first place. Um, so it's going to be something like that, and it's important for you to know how your body, how you respond to these triggers and respond to that resistance to flow. When something blocks you, when something frustrates you, angers you, whether it's real or imagined. And like William is saying, is there really a clear and present danger out there? Or is the punishment not fitting the crime because you are importing everything that ever reminded you of the frustration that you're feeling at this moment? And so there's this overbearing response, you know. And then how do you move from resistance to flow to flowing again? How do you do that? William's saying, hey, he knows. He just leans in. He leans right back into the conversation, right back into the client, which means he starts caring about the client
Mhm.
again, really focusing on wanting to help that client. How do I get this person from A to B? And then all of a sudden you're outside of your head again. And that's
Mhm.
a really serene place to be. So you need to know how it is that you can push through and reconnect and be aware of what that feels like and what the mechanisms are, the techniques are that you use. Danielle was saying how much she loves the welcoming practice, that she uses that. So that can be, she knows that that's a good go-to. That's a reliable technique that she can use. Maybe for some of you, it's box breathing. We're going to talk about mantras here in a minute. And so there's these techniques that can be used to be able to push us through this. But it's important for you to know and to recognize when you are. Now, he says it'll become obvious as you recognize your own unique patterns of both life energy and death energy. It'll become obvious over time as you continue to monitor yourself and watch yourself in all these various situations. But it's not obvious at the beginning, you know, because to you, when that spike comes, there's a total rationale for why that's exactly how you should feel. And this is righteous anger. And I am, justified in doing all this about it. And, so we get used to that over time if we are consciously approaching our life that way.
Yeah.
And then he says, remember, you can be doing very good things, but if you're doing them with negative energy, the results will not be life-giving for yourself or anyone around you or for the world. And I think we all know that. Maybe we feel like we're doing the right thing, but we're feeling that we're doing it under obligation. We're
Right.
feeling like we did it because we were kind of corralled into doing it or manipulated into doing it, or whatever reason it may be. And so, yeah, we're doing it, and it's going to have its good result for whomever is receiving, who's the object of your good deed. But in the moment, for you, how do you feel about it? Well, you're miserable, you're angry, you're maybe seething inside. And for the people around you, you're not going to be much fun with them either.
Mhm.
And so the point is, can we push through that kind of resistance to the flow and move back into not only the action or the task, but the spirit that is supposed to animate it in the first place? And so this is what he's, and then he turns that around. He says, your thoughts and energy have consequences. Of course they do. And he says, but the opposite is also true. You can do faulty things, but if you're doing them with positive life energy, they will still bear fruit for the world. So even as we're screwing up, making our mistakes, you know, if we're doing it in good faith, if we're doing it with a sense of humor, you know, it can bond us in ways that even doing the right thing wouldn't have bonded us. I mean, how many times do you remember all the things that went wrong as more fondly than the things that went right? Especially if you had good humor about it and you're all laughing about it at the time. And so it's really, once again, this is a task within the task kind of stuff, right? It's not so much about the surface task that is really growing us and teaching us and showing us who we really are. It's the task within the task, which is the connection. That's William leaning back into the client again, when he's pushing through the fatigue and pushing through the malaise and all the other stuff. That's accessing the task within the task. And what does that do? Then it reinvigorates the outer task with meaning and purpose again. And that's the way it really works. That's really what the second half of life is all about. When you have run out of steam in the first half of life, trying to find identity out there, trying to find accomplishment out there, meaning and purpose out there, when you flip the switch and move into the second half of life and find the interior meaning, that doesn't mean that you retire. Doesn't mean that you're done working. What it means is now all of those tasks that had lost their meaning and purpose and had become kind of gray, they become reinvigorated with meaning and purpose because now you're accessing where true meaning and purpose really comes from. So we're doing that over the course of the arc of our lives, and we're also doing it through the arc of a day and the tasks that we do all day long. It's all of a piece. It's all the same thing. As Yahweh said of imperfect David, I see the heart instead of appearances. So run your malware scan over your heart and mind whenever possible. Heart and mind, that stand in for emotions and thoughts, okay? What we're feeling and what we're thinking. And the feeling can include somatic responses, has to include somatic responses, heart and mind, emotions and thoughts whenever possible. Not to judge, hate, or condemn. So you're not tearing yourself up for these things, right?
Right.
You're just noticing them. Oh, this is what's going on. All right, why is this going on? Why am I feeling this way? Is it really something that's happening right now? Does it justify this response, or am I bringing a lot to it? He says just to see the problem and install some new firewalls and soul protection devices. So the real point here is we need to make a practice of doing this throughout the day. It needs to become kind of second nature to us. I know I probably overuse this analogy or metaphor, but lucid dreaming. If you want to learn how to wake up inside your dream, realize that you're dreaming so that you can control the dream, break through the dreamscape as being real. The only way you can do that is during your waking state, is to constantly question your state of consciousness. Right now we'd all be asking ourselves, am I awake or am I dreaming? And I'm looking for cues and clues that would tell me. And as you do that throughout your day, you constantly are practicing questioning your state of consciousness. When you fall asleep, you will automatically do it there too. And then you'll find out that you are dreaming and that you can control that dream. So the analogy to waking life is the same. If we want to wake up inside of waking life, which is what contemplative practice is all about, then we're going to have to constantly be scanning to question our state of consciousness and awareness, and then thereby bring it up more and more as we go.
Dave, that last few words there, like the soul protection devices, I think I have a devil's advocate issue with that one.
Oh, yeah. Lay it on us, man.
I've always liked the idea that the soul, it is always well with the soul, basically. And the the malware that he's talking about here takes on the erroneous task of trying to make the self okay, trying to make the soul okay, essentially. Um, and these efforts to be okay becomes part of our pathology, essentially.
Mhm.
And there's something about knowing that I am at my core, I'm held, I'm always okay, I'm always connected in this spiritual way, and I don't have to be frantically trying to make myself feel better all the time. Right? I can just let things be. So yeah, I agree with everything except those.
Well, I think, and I totally agree with you. If we're thinking of the soul as our deepest self, that self that's beyond words and beyond any kind of egoic calculation or rationalization, then yeah, that soul is always fine. It's always in connection. Um, but there's a lot of stuff in between our ego and that deeper self. And one of them is maybe if we think of soul as more just the emotional response or the animus, that part of us that does react and feel. Um, Trying to protect that in the sense of the firewalls. Um, and that comes again to me right down to awareness and consciousness. When we are aware of these actions within ourselves, then we can put the firewall in place that opens up the space between the stimulus and response. And as we do that over and over again, we're actually rewiring the brain, of course, and creating new neural pathways, creating a new normal for us, so to speak. But I agree with you. If we are able to clear all this away, what's left is in perfect connection with God and doesn't need any protection. and I'm totally with you there. But I think I understand where he's going with this is that on the road to that, we're going to be held captive by a lot of these, again, obsessive thoughts and compulsive actions and these triggering emotions that are left over from all this layering of programming from the past and all the hurts and the traumas and everything else we've been through. So that's what we need to be concerned with. And I suppose, in a way, protecting ourselves from, but more in the sense of just recognizing them for what they are. What we're trying to do is see reality as it really is, to get outside the illusion bubble that we create in our egoic consciousness. But I know exactly what you're saying, William. You know, every once in
Yeah,
a while we hit some phrases from Richard. I have to stop and do the Cocker Spaniel thing and try to
I
figure
was
out.
just to somebody actually when William reminded me this, and I remember she deflects and minimizes, and because I'm the listener, I can see it, the self delusion, and I said she's a lotus eater.
Cedar.
Right? I even told her, you know, the Homer's Odyssey, you're a
Mm.
lotus eater. Did
Do
you?
you know what she means by that? The lotus eaters in the Odysseus and his men land on this island, and it's all idyllic and it's all wonderful, and they eat of this lotus plant, and it drugs them
Mm.
into just being completely complacent, that this is the place that they want to be. And they spend about 10 years on this island, because they have no compunction, they have no desire to move, they have no desire to get home anymore, they have no desire to do anything, they're just wasting away. But inside, they think that they're in this beautiful place. So, yeah, the lotus eaters.
Yeah, because I was telling her, and everything was deflected and minimized and euphemisms. And it, to me, it bugs me. I said, no, it's so. Yeah, so it's also a reflection of why am I irritated? That's her life, but whatever.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So then you got offended by that, Ellen, and then you had a resistance to the flow, and you had to find a way to get past it. You know, if you
So I
think about it,
recognize.
the
Yeah.
lotus eaters would be the exact opposite of the divine dissatisfaction or the blessed unrest that we've been talking about.
Mm.
That part of us that is always pushing us further on and further on, not to the sense that we are dissatisfied with every moment, that we are discontent in the moment. The best way is to have a balance. Yes, we can be content in the moment, but still there's that thing that's calling us on at the same time. Well, the lotus eater has lost that part. There is no calling on anymore.
Mhm.
It's just a complete complacency here and now.
The in one of the books on the Enneagram, they talk about Homer's Odyssey connecting to different points on the Enneagram, and the Lotus Eater was the type 9 that fell asleep.
There you
Oh,
go. There you go.
That's the sloth, right? Right, William? The slothiness, right? The
that's
Sloth.
lazy
right.
side. You just chill.
Okay, I wanted to get into some mantras here. So this is just another practical thing that we can add, and I think it tracks with the scanning, and it tracks with us working through our day to bring ourselves back and ground ourselves. So let me share my screen, and there we go. Can you see that?
Mhm.
Okay, so this is in a nurse's journal. So this is coming at it from a healthcare point of view, and using mantras for uh, for specifically for nurses, but it tracks with all of us. I hope that you can read that print's not too small. I don't think I can make it. I don't think I make. Anyway, let's try this. When was the last time you really listened to someone with undivided and full attention? Were you present in that moment without thoughts of what you needed to do next? Could you listen without trying to finish the other person's sentences? If your answer is no, then you may be a good candidate for mantram repetition. What's a mantram, you ask? Isn't it called a mantra? Before answering these questions, I acknowledge that there are many opinions and teachings about the best ways to calm the mind, meditate, manage stress, stay mindful, and be present with others. Each person must find the method or practice that works best for him or her. For those who have never tried any meditative practices, however, mantra repetition may be a good place to start. A mantram or a mantra, either spelling has the same meaning in Sanskrit, is a word or a phrase defined as a short, powerful spiritual formula used to call up what is best and deepest in ourselves. The phrase mantram repetition was introduced to the West by Sri Eknath Eswaran as part of his 8-point program. There are many commonly recommended mantrams to choose from, but it is important to select one for yourself to match your personal philosophy and spiritual needs. Silently repeating a mantram is a portable contemplative practice that can be exercised nearly any time or place without needing a quiet environment, specific time period, or posture. It is used to teach your mind to focus, pause, and be present even while on the go. So right away you can see that the mantra or the mantram functions a lot like the sacred word of centering prayer, right? Only instead of just saying it, just once and letting it kind of diffuse and displace the thoughts that have crept in, this is something that you're going to be repeating consciously over and over for periods of time. It's much like the early Christians' Jesus prayer, where they would say something like Kyrie eleison, which is Lord have mercy, or Jesus have mercy on me, a sinner. They would say that hundreds of times a day in this fashion, like a mantra, until the prayer was saying them, they would say. In other words, you keep doing this consciously, and after a while, it changes the level of your consciousness as you move through. And this is what the mantra can do for you. You're not going to say it all throughout the day. You're going to say it at intervals or when you find yourself really stressed or being triggered. So the benefits of practicing mantra repetition: repeating a mantra requires intention and focus. When practicing correctly, your mind should have no room for thinking of anything else. So you know when you're doing it and when you are not. In addition, while practicing mantra mentally, you simultaneously slow down your thought process and develop the skill of concentrating and focusing on just one thing, your mantra. Mantra repetition is done internally, quietly, inside the mind, and requires both commitment and intention. This may be difficult at first. However, over time, with consistent daily practice, repeating a mantra builds expertise to direct one's attention at will. It fosters slowing down and being present in the moment. This internal skill of concentration can later be transferred externally to a variety of daily tasks. Thus, the practice of repeating a mantra with intention and focus becomes a means to better concentrate on other things in your life. From the mundane, doing dishes, to the sublime, being intimate with a partner. And unlike a motto, pep talk, inspirational passage, or personal affirmation, a mantra embodies a sacred essence, higher power, or God's assistance. It is powerful. Travis and Shear categorize meditative practices into 3 types. 1, object focus, such as attention on breath, sound, picture, etc. So if you think about that first type, that's going to include the Anapanasati meditation that we talked about last week, right? Where you have the focus on the breath. It also includes centering prayer. You have your focus on your sacred word. So you bring that into focus. So it can be a breath, sound, or picture. It can be a candle. It can be a lot of other things that you focus on as an object to help you to be completely present and, again, to displace all the other thoughts and distractions. Second one is open monitoring, where attention moves toward whatever comes into one's awareness: thoughts, feelings, physical sensations. And so this is getting closer to his idea of scanning for malware, right? So we're scanning through. Where is our attention focused on? Where are we being triggered? What's going on internally? Where's the flow? Where's the resistance to flow? So we're trying to monitor that and see what's going on inside ourselves. And then the third is transcendent, where focus allows one to move beyond thoughts, as described in transcendental meditation. But this is also where anapanasati, which is focused on the breath, turns into vipassana, which is then transcending thought processes as well. And centering prayer is going to be a combination of 1 and 3, where we're using the object focus of the sacred word in order to then transcend our conscious thought processes altogether. So we're trying to move through into that transcendent space. The practice of mantra repetition involves these first two. It is an object-focused method, but the skills derived from its practice further develop the ability to capture moment-to-moment awareness, with a bonus of choosing what to stay focused upon. Mantra repetition does not strive to transcend consciousness, but instead makes a person more conscious. So how can mantra repetition improve intentionality and presence with the patients and coworkers, and you insert whoever you're hanging around with all day? There are 3 ways that it helps. First, mantra is like a pause button for the mind. This is opening up the stimulus space between the stimulus and the response, right? 2, mantra brings us immediately into the present moment. If you're focused on that one thing, all that other stuff that's taking you out and taking you sideways kind of gets pushed away, and now you're right back and grounded. Mantram strengthens our ability to cultivate presence, active listening, and doing one thing at a time. Repeating a mantra is an instant reminder to be here now. At work, repeat a mantra just a few times before meeting your next patient. Repeat a mantra to refocus yourself before doing a procedure or giving medications. When walking from meeting to meeting, repeat a mantra to give your mind a mini break from the day's hassles. Repeat it when you notice you are getting anxious or worried about things that are completely out of your control. Repeat it when ruminating on something unnecessary or that you simply cannot deal with right now. A mantra can help block out events that happened yesterday or those that might happen in the future. Use mantra repetition to calm yourself before presenting sad or disturbing news to a patient or family. Research evidence has shown that mantra repetition is a valuable tool in the workplace. Healthcare workers have reported reduced levels of perceived stress, anxiety, anger, and burnout. They have also reported improved spiritual well-being and quality of life. Presence has been more difficult to study, but recently, Dr. Carol Kostovich developed a valid and reliable measure called the presence of nursing scale. More research on mantra repetition is being planned using the PONS. In conclusion, let mantra repetition become a habit in your life, and it can serve as a steady friend. It can improve your ability to be present and intentional with others. Best of all, a mantra can be repeated at any time, any place, and anywhere. It is particularly useful when waiting in elevators and walking or exercising, and especially before falling asleep at night. Make sure you use it at times when you need it, as well as those times when you do not, kind of what we were talking about before. Then it will be there for you instantly. It is readily available, quickly implemented, sustainable, and a very effective tool for living in the now. Give it a try.
Mm.
So I wanted to also show you this one because it's like, how do you choose a mantra? And this is just like, how do you choose a sacred word? I always love the story about Bill Fellers. You know, he was trying different sacred words and none of them were working for him. And he would typically try to do his centering prayer sit halfway through a hike in the hills around his house. And he was sitting there on this bench trying to center and it wasn't working. And he sees cactus. So cactus became his sacred word and it worked perfectly. You know, the sacred word, the mantra, doesn't have any significance in and of itself. It's a symbol of your intentionality to come back to presence and to be very consciously aware at that moment. But on the other hand, much care should be taken in choosing a mantra. Take your time and choose it wisely. Avoid words that evoke negative associations or bad memories. Choose one that appeals to you or offers strength and support. Choose one that is compatible with your religious background and or spiritual beliefs. Some people have no difficulty choosing a mantra, such as when a word or phrase jumps out at them immediately. Others have to try it on and practice repeating it silently for a few days or even weeks to see how it feels, only to discover that when they decided to pick a new one, they couldn't. Their minds automatically reverted to repeating the first one. Using that mantra had already become a habit. Using mantras for slowing down. Let's see how much time we got. I think these are 2 articles that I think I will include in the email, so you can spend some time with it. But it's something to experiment with. I think on this first one, they had right up here a few examples of commonly recommended mantras. So Rama, meaning eternal joy within, from Mahatma Gandhi. Shanti, meaning eternal peace, from Hinduism. Jesus or Ave Maria from Christianity. Rabboni Shel Olam, meaning Master of the Universe, from Judaism. Oh, Wankan Tanka, meaning Oh Great Spirit. So you can see if it was Jesus, if it was Ave Maria, if it was peace, joy. I mean, it could be anything. It could be that your sacred word that you have settled on for centering prayer, and now you use it as a mantra. But it's now during your waking day in all those situations I talked about, waiting for an elevator, walking to a meeting, but you go into the internal repetition of the mantra. And it becomes Pavlovian in the sense that after you've done this for a while and it keeps taking you back to that centered space, as soon as you start saying it, you're automatically going to move into that space as muscle memory because you practiced it as much as you have. But here's another tool for you to use. You know, Anapanasati, following the breath, meditation offline is a tool. Centering prayer offline is a tool. Mantram is an online tool. The welcoming practice or prayer, an online tool and something that you can use. And we'll get in the welcoming prayer he's got later on in the text here. But these are tools that you can use alongside of the practice and the prompts that he is giving us in the text itself. All right. That was a quick run around the block, but at least we went through some of it and you're aware of it, and then you can read the articles if you like and see if it's something you want to give a try.
That's great.
Yeah.
Dave.
Any thoughts or comments about any of that stuff?
Just love it.
Yeah.
I like that First Samuel's quote there. I see the heart instead of appearances.
Mm-hmm.
I maybe we can come back to that next time, but I think there's a lot of weight, a lot of meat on that sentence, basically.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. But I mean, think about it. You know, I know that there's people you know that are maybe gruff or overbearing, bulls in a china shop, but you also know that they've got a heart of gold. And if you can get through the rough
Thanks for
exterior,
describing me, Dave.
George, perfect example, you know, heart of gold.
I
And you know
remember
that.
Dave telling me one time that you were incorrigible. You remember telling me that, Dave? That was
I
think we
did
were
tell you that,
or
and
something.
you had to look it up, didn't you?
No, I just ignored what you said.
George, wait, George, you too?
Yes, I'm very, very stubborn.
Yeah, my teacher called me incorrigible. So I'm saying
Well,
you too.
they told that to Babe Ruth, and look how much money he made. You know. But anyway, sorry about that, Dave.
That's
Didn't mean
okay,
to
man.
interrupt. I didn't mean to interrupt the flow.
Yeah, see, I'm resisting the flow right now.
George,
But
it's
yeah,
your
but
malware.
what's that, Scotty?
It's your malware, George.
I know, Scott. You need to help me with that, bro. You're the computer guy.
But what William is talking about, you know, that God is looking at the heart and not appearances. In other words, you know, beneath whatever we've got, whatever we project, whatever our personality entails that may or may not be pleasing to us, you know, that there is this deeper intentionality that can change everything if we will allow ourselves to be present enough to find it. That's our choice, you know. That's what loving the enemy is really all about. Jesus saying, you know, here's this person that you don't really like, but if you can just be, eventually you'll find what's really going on inside. And from that flows the actions we call loving, and the affection and the sentimentality and devotion even that we can feel in close relationships. But it starts with presence. It starts with awareness. And if we haven't learned to build that up, then we're going to be missing so much. That's possible.
A lot of work.
Yeah.
A lot of work for me.
It's a lot of work, but it gets easier as you practice it, like anything else you do. And it really is a labor of love. How else would you want to live but
No, I
this?
agree 100%.
Yeah.
That's why I'm in here.
So, okay. We are done for tonight. Scotty.
Lord, thanks for this time together with us and you and exploring tools and techniques and stories and shared experiences and so many different things about this amazing creation we have. We get to interact with and play around with and explore and just have a very dynamic experience if we'll let it be such. We thank you, Lord Jesus, that you're at the center of all this, that you're steering the car and we're not getting off the rails too far. And you know where to jerk us back and where to push us on forward. And we trust you with that. So we thank you, Lord, for this time together and the possibilities that are presented here about expanding the quality of our life through these different techniques. We love you, Lord. Jesus, we pray all this and we thank you in your holy name and say our amens. Amen.
Amen. All right. So next week, we're going to be talking about silence. It's going to be a very short session because, you know.
Be
It'll
still
be
and know
fun.
that I'm God. All right.
Yeah. All right. See you all on Sunday. Thank you so
All right.
much.
Take care, guys.
Good night, guys.
Bye,
Good night,
guys.
everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Absolutely.
Good night. Good night. Good night, Jordana.
Okay, I'll see you on Sunday.
See you Sunday, dear. Bye-bye.
Bye.